Now, resolving Ivory Coast's political crisis is proving to be quite a difficult task. The African Union is impaneling 5 heads of state and giving them 1 month to develop a legally binding resolution to break the impasse between incumbent President Laurent Gbagbo and President-elect Alassane Ouattara. But some pro-Gbagbo supporters oppose some of the panelists. The 53-member African Union selected the presidents of South Africa, Tanzania, Chad, Mauritania and Burkina Faso to assist in resolving the Ivorian crisis. United Nations Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon pledges UN support.
The current stalemate is not acceptable. The longer it persists, the greater the risks. I welcome the African Union's decision to tackle this problem within a month.
However, Charles Blegude, leader of a movement known as the Young Patriots, opposes the inclusion of Blaise Compaoré of Burkina Faso on the panel. Blegude, recently named Minister of Youth and Employment in Mr. Gbagbo's government, says Mr. Compaoré has been complicit in efforts to overthrow Mr. Gbagbo over the years.
Il faut récuser Blaise Compaoré. Nous le récusons.
We must reject Blaise Compaoré. We do reject him. Not only we reject him, but he's not welcome in Ivory Coast. He's one of the belligerent. Therefore, he cannot be sent to assess a situation in which he's himself strongly involved.
Supporters of Mr. Gbagbo rejected mediation efforts of Kenyan Prime Minister Raila Odinga, citing partiality to Mr. Ouattara. Senior Associate Joel Barkin of the Center for Strategic and International Studies says finding the right mixture of people is challenging.
This group of countries is most predisposed to the status quo. That is to say, an investigation that will go on really will not resolve the situation. I'd be very surprised, for example, if Chad or Burkina Faso would come out strongly for seating Mr. Ouattara. I could be wrong. South Africa is a more interesting choice, and Tanzania.
Since the November 28th election, Ivory Coast has been operating with parallel governments. Mr. Gbagbo, despite calls to step down, remains in office, citing fraud on the pro-Ouattara north of the country that otherwise would have given him victory. Meanwhile, Mr. Ouattara, recognized internationally as the legitimate leader, is operating as head of state out of an Abidjan hotel under the protection of UN troops. Joel Barkin says options that will satisfy both parties are limited.
A compromise solution is already, to some extent, an endorsement for President Gbagbo, because then Gbagbo will insist, since he controls the army, that he continues to control the Ministry of Defense and probably the Ministry of his Interior as well. And then Ouattara is faced with a very tough choice, as was Raila Odinga in Kenya or Tsvangirai in Zimbabwe, of whether to go into a government in which you don't really have equal power.
Mr. Ouattara has called for a stop in cocoa exports, attempting to force Mr. Gbagbo out of office by financially crippling him.
The African Development Bank has cut off funds. Ouattara has had some considerable success in persuading the World Bank and others to really cut the flow of money into Côte d'Ivoire. And if cocoa farmers, and particularly cocoa exporters, essentially stop the remittance of the revenues from cocoa exports to the official treasury, then Gbagbo's days may be numbered. But that will play out over the next several months, and whether or not the Ivorian government will have money to pay its civil servants, to pay the army, and the like.